The Sunday dinner table went silent. My heart pounded as my mother-in-law's words filled the air like poison. My husband, Thomas, held my hand under the table but said nothing. "Excuse me," I finally whispered. "What do you mean my children don't deserve any inheritance?" Patricia, my mother-in-law, wiped her mouth with a napkin and looked at me coldly. "It's simple, Sophia. Blood is thicker than water. When Thomas's father and I pass away, everything should go to our real grandchildren, Amanda's kids." I glanced at my children, Emma, 8, and Lucas, 6, who were focused on their tablets in the living room, unaware of their grandmother's cruel words. They were adopted, something Patricia never let me forget. "Mom, that's enough," Thomas finally said, but his voice was weak, as always when facing his mother. "I'm just being practical," Patricia continued, piling more roast beef onto her plate. "Amanda's kids are our flesh and blood. They should get the family estate, the summer house, and the investments. That's only fair." I thought about our small 3-bedroom home, which Thomas and I worked hard to afford. Meanwhile, Patricia and her husband lived in a huge mansion and owned a vacation house they barely used. "And what about Emma and Lucas?" I asked, my voice stronger now. "They're your grandchildren too. We adopted them as babies. They've never known another family." Patricia laughed coldly. "Raising someone else's children doesn't make them family. Amanda's kids carry our DNA. They deserve to continue our legacy." Anger boiled inside me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Thomas, we're leaving." My husband looked torn, caught between me and his mother. "Mom, you've gone too far," he said, but his voice was still weak. "I'm just saying what everyone thinks," Patricia called as I gathered the kids. "Ask Amanda. She agrees with me." The drive home was quiet, except for the kids chatting about their games. Thomas opened his mouth to speak but kept closing it. I stared out the window, holding back tears. I refused to let Patricia win, even from a distance. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in our home office looking at old photos. One showed my father holding Emma the day we brought her home, his face full of pride. Another showed Lucas on his shoulders at the zoo, both laughing. My dad never treated them differently because they were adopted. He was the grandfather they deserved. Dad had passed away 6 months ago, and the pain was still fresh. He had been sick for a while. But his decline was sudden at the end. My mom was still grieving, and we hadn't gone through most of his things yet. He was a quiet, hard-working man who had been a financial advisor. He wasn't flashy, but he taught me to save and plan for the future. 2 days after that awful dinner, I got a call at work from an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Sophia Carter, this is James Wilson from Wilson & Associates Law Firm. I was your father's attorney. There's something important we need to discuss. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" I agreed, curious. As far as I knew, Dad had a simple will. Everything went to Mom. What could this be about? The next morning, I sat across from Mr. Wilson, a serious-looking man in his 60s. He pulled out a thick folder. "Your father was a remarkable man, Mrs. Carter," he said, "and much more strategic than anyone realized. What I'm about to show you has been in place for over 8 years. He pushed a document toward me. As I read, my hands started shaking. "This is a trust," Mr. Wilson explained. "Your father set it up the day you adopted Emma, and he added to it when Lucas joined your family." I stared at the numbers on the page, unable to believe what I was seeing. This can't be right." Mr. Wilson smiled. "Your father was excellent at his job, a great investor, and even better at keeping secrets. The trust now holds around $4.2 million. The room spun. Dad had always lived so simply. How had he saved so much? He wanted to make sure his grandchildren were taken care of. Mr. Wilson continued. "All of them. This trust is ironclad. It can only be used for Emma and Lucas's education, home, and well-being. And he left you a letter." I reached for the envelope with shaking hands, thinking about Patricia's cruel words at dinner. If only she knew what was coming. I opened Dad's letter with shaking hands, recognizing his familiar neat handwriting. "My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to tell you in person how proud I am of you and the family you've built. From the moment you and Thomas brought Emma home, and later Lucas, I knew these children were meant to be ours. Blood doesn't make a family, love does. I've spent years building this trust, knowing there might be people who would treat them differently because they're adopted. I wanted to ensure they would always have security and opportunities no matter what. The money I set aside came from my personal investments and savings. Your mother doesn't know about it, as I kept this separate from our family finances. Use it wisely, protect them fiercely, and remember that I love them as much as any grandfather could love his grandchildren. Love, Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I folded the letter. Even from beyond the grave, Dad was still protecting his family. That evening, I showed Thomas the trust documents and Dad's letter. His face went through a range of emotions: shock, disbelief, and finally, shame. I should have stood up to my mother more strongly, he admitted, running his hands through his hair. I never imagined your father had done something like this. The question is, I said carefully, what do we do now? Your mother made her feelings very clear about our children's place in the family. Thomas was quiet for a moment. We tell her. She needs to know she was wrong. I wasn't so sure. Maybe we should wait. But Thomas was already pulling out his phone. No, Mom needs to hear this now. We're having dinner at their house tomorrow night. The next evening we arrived at Patricia's mansion. Amanda, Thomas's sister, was there with her 3 children. Perfect, an audience for whatever drama was about to unfold. Patricia was in rare form, having just returned from a luxury cruise. Oh, Amanda dear, you must take your children on the Mediterranean cruise next summer. The connections they could make with the right sort of families would be invaluable for their future. I caught the emphasis on right sort of families and saw Thomas's jaw clench. Actually, Mom, Thomas spoke up as the dessert was being served. We have some news about our children's future. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Oh. Thomas looked at me and I nodded. He pulled out the trust documents. Sophia's father set up a trust for Emma and Lucas. It's worth over $4 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's fork clattered against her plate. Patricia's face went through several shades of red. That's impossible, she finally sputtered. Your father was a simple financial advisor. A very good one, I said quietly, and one who believed that all his grandchildren deserved security and love. Let me see those papers, Patricia demanded, snatching them from Thomas. Her eyes widened as she read. This is more than we have set aside for Amanda's children. Amanda leaned forward, her interest piqued. What do you mean, Mom? How much do you have set aside for my kids? Patricia's face paled. That's not important right now. But Amanda wasn't letting go. No, I want to know. You've been telling me for years how my children would inherit everything, how they'd be set for life. What's the actual number? The cracks in Patricia's carefully constructed facade were starting to show. She stammered something about investments and property values. Mom, Amanda pressed. How much? About $2 million, Patricia finally admitted. But the property values. So all this time, Amanda interrupted, all your talk about blood being thicker than water, about my children being the only true heirs, and they're actually getting less than their adopted cousins? Patricia looked like she might faint. But there are real grandchildren. They're all real, Thomas said firmly, finally finding his voice. Emma and Lucas are as much our children as if they'd been born to us. Dad understood that, Mom. Why can't you? I watched as Patricia's worldview crumbled in real time. Her perfectly planned family hierarchy was being upended by the quiet financial advisor she'd always looked down on at family gatherings. I think, Amanda said, standing up, that we should go. And Mom, maybe it's time to rethink some things. She gathered her children but paused at the door. Sophia, I'm sorry for not speaking up before. You have beautiful children. As Amanda left, Patricia sat in her chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. The mighty matriarch brought low by her own prejudices. Thomas took my hand. We should go too. But as we stood to leave, Patricia spoke in a small voice. Could I see the letter your father wrote? I hesitated before handing over Dad's letter. It felt too personal, too precious to share with someone who would cause us so much pain. But something in Patricia's eyes, a glimmer of vulnerability I'd never seen before, made me reach into my purse and pull out the carefully folded paper. Patricia's hands trembled as she read. I watched her face change, saw tears form in her eyes for the first time in the 12 years I'd known her. He wrote this when Emma was adopted, she asked softly. I took a deep breath. Dad added to the trust when we adopted Lucas. He believed family was about love, not blood. Patricia wiped her eyes with a fancy silk handkerchief. Your father, he never said a word. All those years at family gatherings, he just smiled and played with the kids while I. She didn't finish, but she didn't have to. We all remembered her sharp comments, her cold stares, the way she always treated Emma and Lucas as outsiders. Suddenly, Patricia stood up. I want to show you something, she said. Thomas, you've never seen this either. She led us to her home office, a room I'd never been inside. From a bottom drawer, she pulled out an old photo album. This is me, she said, pointing to a picture of a little girl with two adults. With my adoptive parents. Thomas and I exchanged shocked looks. She had never told us this. I was adopted when I was 6, Patricia said, her voice shaky. I remember my birth parents. I remember feeling like I didn't belong. My adoptive parents were wonderful, but I always felt like an outsider. She flipped to another photo of herself as a teenager. When I met Thomas's father, I was afraid his family wouldn't accept me if they knew I was adopted. So I lied. I made up stories about my childhood, about my family, and over time, I started to believe them myself. She looked down, guilt on her face. I think that's why I was so cruel to Emma and Lucas. Seeing them so happy, so accepted, it brought back all the fears I had buried. I sat there, speechless. All these years, her judgment and cruelty had come from her own pain. Mom, Thomas said gently, why didn't you ever tell us? Because I was ashamed, she whispered, and then I got so caught up in proving I belonged that I became the kind of person I used to fear. She turned to me, her mascara smudged. Sophia, what your father did for Emma and Lucas, it's the same thing my parents did for me. They left me everything, their only child, adopted or not. And here I was, trying to deny your children the same love and security. A long silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of thunder in the distance. Patricia straightened her shoulders. I want to make this right, she said. Not just by changing my will. I will, by the way. But with time, with love. If you'll let me. I thought about all the hurt, all the times she had ignored my children, left them out of family moments. But I also thought about my father's letter, about his belief in love over blood. We can start fresh, I said at last. But it has to be real. No more comparing the kids. No more talk about real family. Patricia nodded. I'd like to take Emma and Lucas for ice cream tomorrow. Just them. I have years of grandmother moments to make up for. Thomas squeezed my hand, relief in his eyes. His mother and I had finally found peace. The next day, I watched from the window as Patricia pulled up in her fancy car. Emma and Lucas ran outside, excited. Children forgive so easily. As they drove away, I reread Dad's letter. He had known. He had known my children might face rejection because they were adopted. But instead of fighting, he had protected them quietly, building a future no one could take away. A week later, Patricia invited everyone over, including Amanda and her kids. The children played in the backyard while we sat on the patio. Inside, a new family photo hung on the wall. This time, it included all of us. I watched Patricia teach Emma how to trim her roses. Lucas showed his cousins a new game on his tablet. I smiled, thinking of Dad. He had given us more than money. He had given us a chance to heal. That night, after everyone left, I found a letter in my purse, written in Patricia's elegant handwriting. Dear Sophia, thank you for giving me the chance to be the grandmother your children deserve. Your father was a wise man who understood what I had forgotten. That family is built on love, not blood. I promise to honor his legacy by loving all my grandchildren equally, completely, and without reservation. With love and gratitude, Patricia, Mom, if you let me be that someday.